So you'll have to play around, play the animation a few times and see what works best for you. Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to create this cute icon animation, and I really hope you will enjoy this one. And if you do, please don't forget to leave that like. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the fastest and most effective way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner skills through low poly illustration all the way to full character illustration and textured environments. We even have a little bit of sculpting there, hard surface modeling. So if you're interested, please check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all, let me just drag selection around everything here, press X and delete. And now we'll create a shield. So let's press Shift A and let's go mesh and add a plane. Now tap into the edit mode and let's press M and merge at center. That will basically merge everything into a single vertex. So let's now press 1 on a numpad for a front view. Make sure you are in the vertex select mode and press G then Z and move this down somewhere here. And now let's press E and do one extrusion, second one, and now we are going to curve this so we create something like a shield. Now make sure you're trying to match position of this vertex with this one, and same here, we want these two match. And now let's go to the modifiers panel, let's add a mirror modifier, so go generate and mirror modifier. And let's enable clipping here. And now we'll just press E and join it here in the middle. And of course we can adjust the shape, so we can move this down and create something like this and maybe compress it down a little bit. So press S then Z and scale it down. Okay, and now we'll press F to fill, and let's select this one here. And make sure you switch the snapping to vertex and press G then X and hold Control and snap it here. So we match this and we'll move these a little bit to the side. And now select this one, press G then X and move it here. And we can probably grab both of these, press G then X and move them here. So there's a little bit more of a space there. And maybe this one a little bit lower, and then let's bring these closer and this one lower as well. Okay, and now let's select these pairs and press J to join them. And I think this will need some adjustment. So press G then X and snap it again. And select these two by holding Shift, press J to join. And now we can tab out and let's apply the mirror modifier like this. Now we can tab back in and let's join these. So we'll have a little bit cleaner geometry when we separate this. Okay, something like this. Okay, and before we rip this apart, let's hold Alt key and select the top loop and hold Shift additionally and select the other loop here as well. Let's press Shift D to duplicate, right click to release in place, and press P and enter to separate the selection, and that will create a new object right here. So now we can press 2 for edge select, hold Alt and select this loop right here, and then hold Alt and Shift and select these other ones. And now press V to rip them apart and right click to release in place. And now press A to select all and E to extrude towards the back. And now just to be safe, press A and Shift N to recalculate the normals. Now we can tab out and that'll be our shield. So let's rename it here. And now let's select the other object, tab into the edit mode. Press 1 for vertex select so we can see our vertices. And now press A to select all and E then Y and extrude it all like this. And just for a second, because now I can select all and press Alt S and just collapse this like that. Okay, something like this should be enough. And now we can Alt click this front loop, press X and delete those vertices. Let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad. And now we'll just select these, press M and merge at center and do the same on the other side. And now we can press A, F to fill and E to extrude. Just like that. And now again, let's press A and Shift N to recalculate the normal. So this will be the base of our icon. And now press 3 for face select, select the front face here and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now tab out. And now we'll create the hammer. So let's press Shift A, let's add a cube. Tap into the edit mode and press S to scale it down a little bit. And then S, then X to scale X-axis like this. And we can tab out and press G then Y and move it away a little bit like this. Now tab back in, press 3 for face select and select this face. We can enable X-ray view, hold shift and select the one on the other side and press Ctrl B to do bevel. If you have more segments here, reduce them with the mouse wheel to create something like this. And now we can tab out and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. I'll snap the cursor to the origin point, so we can press Shift A and create a cylinder. Now let's modify the number of vertices to something like 12. Tab into the edit mode. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on the numpad and press S to scale this down like this, and then S then X to scale it on X-axis a little bit as well. And now let's look from the front, press G then Z, move it down here. And now select the bottom, press G then Z and move this down, something like this. Now this is too thick probably, so let's press A and press S then Shift Z to scale only on X and Y axis like this. And I think this will be enough. So now let's select the top, press X and delete faces. We'll leave that open. And now we can tab out, select both objects. Let's look from the front again by pressing 1 on the numpad and tab back into the edit mode. And now you can see we are editing both objects at once, so we can press A and G then Z and move this up because I want the origin point to stay here in the middle. So now if I tab out, I can just rotate it all like this. And then if I tab back in, I can move this along the local Z axis. So press G then Z twice to move it up and down. To position it nicely here, something like this. And let's tab out and scale it up a little bit and press Ctrl A and apply that scale. Now let's create a sword, so let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Tab into the edit mode and press S to scale it down like this, and then R then X and 90 to rotate this 90 degrees. We can press 1 for vertex select, select the bottom vertices, press G then Z and move them down like here. And now press Ctrl R to create a loop cut down here and Ctrl R to create one in the middle, right click to release. And now we can select the bottom 3, press M and merge at center and select the 3 on top and press S to scale it down. Now we can tab out, let's press Shift A and we'll add the plane again, tab into the edit mode and let's scale it down quite a lot like this. Press G then Z and move it up here. All like that. And now we can press S then X, scale it up. And then E to extrude. Let's press Ctrl R and increase number of cuts with the mouse wheel to something like 3. And now we can select these vertices on the side by holding Shift and press G then Z and hold them down. And now let's tab out, let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. Let's modify the vertices to 12. Tab into the edit mode and scale them down. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on the numpad and you can see the size that's necessary to fit. And now press E, then Z and extrude this up. And press Ctrl R and create one cut here in the middle. Right click to release and scale it up. And now we can press Ctrl B to create the bevel and increase number of cuts with the mouse wheel. Now final piece, let's tab out and let's press Shift A and we'll add a cylinder. Tab into the edit mode and scale this down and press S then Z, scale on a Z axis as well. Now press R then X and rotate 90 degrees. Let's confirm with enter. Let's look from the front by pressing 1 on the numpad and press G then Z and move it up. And now press S and scale it down and try to fit it here. Maybe this will need to be a little bit wider, but we'll see about that. Now we can tab out and let's disable the X-ray, and now we'll need to finish the blade here. So hit slash on the numpad for a local view, tab into the edit mode, and now we can press A and E to extrude everything outside. And now we'll enable auto merge here, select these vertices by holding Shift and press G twice and slide them back here. And once you do that, they will merge here. So let's do that with these two on the other side as well. And now let's select this one, press G twice and slide it back here like this. And now press 3 for face select. Select these faces by holding Shift, press X and delete them. And now we can add the mirror modifier. And let's switch X to Y and enable clipping. Now we can hit that slash to exit the local view and we can play with the proportions. So press 1 for front view, and let's tab out and let's select everything here by holding shift. Let's look from the side by pressing 3 on a numpad and press G, then Y, and move it back here behind the hammer. Now let's hit 1 on a numpad for front view and press R to rotate, and now you can see we'll need to move this up and down, but I want the origin point to stay there in the middle. So with all of these objects selected, we can just tab in, press A to select all, and G and Z twice to move this along its local Z-axis, and press S to scale it up and down. So this way we can match this nicely. Okay, and maybe rotate a little bit more like this. Okay, and we can do the same thing here. Maybe make it smaller, tiny bit like this. Now make sure there are no overlaps like here. So this will need to get fixed here. So I'll just scale it down and move along the local Z-axis. And now let's add some smoothness to this. So first of all, let's select this. And as you can remember, we ripped those apart. So these should be now separate. So first of all, make sure you disable the auto merge in the edit mode so they don't merge when you move them or something like that. And now let's add bevel modifier. And let's increase segments to 2, and let's reduce the amount. And now we can press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier, or you can do it from the menu, generate and subdivision modifier here. Make sure the levels of viewport are set to 2, right click and shade smooth. And we can do the same thing here. So let's add the bevel modifier, 2 segments. And let's press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision, right click, shade smooth. Now here, same thing, so we'll add some bevel modifier, but here I want to change the limit method from angle to none, and just reduce the amount, increase the segments to 2, and we can press Ctrl 2 to add the same subdivision, right click, shade smooth, and let's do the same here. Though here I want to keep the angle, but change it to something like 40, and reduce the amount, and maybe 45, so we get rid of the unnecessary beveling there. And now let's increase the segments and press Ctrl 2 to add that subdivision, right click and shade smooth. And we'll do the same here. So let's add that bevel modifier there. And again, we'll switch this to none, increase the segments to 2, and just reduce this like that. And we can keep this sharper and press Ctrl 2, right click, shade smooth. Now let's select this one. We'll add the same bevel modifier, reduce the amount, and increase the segments. Though here we have these ugly corners, so let's go to geometry and switch this to arc and press Ctrl 2. And now you can see there are bevels there, and I want this to be more smooth, so let's increase this to 45 and we'll get something like this. We can shade this smooth. Now here we can just press Ctrl 2 to apply that subdivision modifier, right click, shade smooth. And here we can add the same bevel modifier, so let's just hold shift, select this, press Ctrl L and copy modifiers. And now right click and shade smooth. So this should be enough. Now to be able to move everything and manipulate it as one object, we can just select this object by holding shift with the blade as last, press Ctrl P and parent to object, and do the same here and parent. And now let's select this one, hold shift, parent it, the shield. And finally, we'll select the blade and the hammerhead and parent it to the shield as well. So now we can move the whole shield, but these are acting as separate objects. So let's now create a simple animation. So first of all, let's hold Shift S and snap cursor to roll the origin, and let's press Shift A and we'll create a camera. Now press Alt R to reset the rotation, press G then Y and move it back, and then R, then X and 90 degrees. And let's hit 0 on a numpad to look from the camera, and press G then Z twice to move it back and forth like this. So I want this frontal view here. And now let's create some background. So let's press Shift A and let's add a plane, press R then X and 90 degrees, G then Y to move it back, and just scale it up. Now let's look from the camera And now press Ctrl B to limit the render preview only to camera bounce. Let's go to render settings. I'll switch this to cycles, GPU, and enable denoising. And I will use something like 128 samples for the preview animation. I think they'll be fine. And don't forget to enable motion blur for the final render. They'll really make a lot of difference here. And now let's press Shift A and we'll add light, an area light. Now we can press G then Z, move it up. Now let's make it large like this. And let's hold Z and choose rendered preview. So this is what we get here because the light is really subtle. So let's go to the light settings and let's go for something strong like 500 here. And now I want to create a nice rim light there. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a spotlight. Press G then Z, move it up a little bit. And now we can hit period on the keyboard and switch to 3D cursor, or you can do it right here. And press R twice to rotate this to the back like this. And now we can press R then Z and rotate around the Z axis. Now this is really subtle, so we'll need something really strong like 1500 or maybe even more, something like 3000. And let's look from the front. Now you will see we get this nice rim light here. And now if you press R then Z and rotate back and forth, you will get more and more light hitting from the side. So I really like this, and maybe we can do even stronger, something like 5K. And now we get this nice articulation of the model, and additionally we can select this, press G, then Y, and move it back and forth a little bit. So we get more light from the front. Okay, I really like this. And finally, I want some backlight here. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a point light, press G, then Y, and move it back here. So it almost touches the plane there. And let's increase this to something like 1500. So it's really strong. But since it's so close, when you look at the front, it will create this nice halo around. And it'll help us to separate this from the background. So let's select the background and let's create a new material there. And let's make it really dark. Maybe a hint of greenish or bluish tone, something like this. And then you can play with the brightness here. And you will see how the light makes all the difference there. And of course, you can select the point light and make it even stronger if you think it's too subtle. And then change the color, for example, to something blue like this. And I think for now, this will be enough. Let's play with an animation. So let's hold Z and switch back to solid view. And let's expand the timeline. And I think something like 120 for now should be enough. And let's go to the output settings and switch this to 30 FPS. And now let's select the shield and press N for the side panel. And we'll insert the value for Z rotation. So let's insert single keyframe. So we have only one channel there. And now let's move this back to 120, or let's say something smaller because this will be really fast animation. So let's say something like 50. And now let's change this to 720. Right click and insert single keyframe. Now let's expand this and hold Ctrl and Tab into the timeline and press A to select all keyframes and hit period on a numpad to focus your view. If you don't have a numpad, you can always hold Ctrl and middle mouse and just move up and down to zoom on the y-axis and left and right to zoom on x-axis. And now you will get a nice view of your curve. So now this accelerates and does 2 rotations, which is not exactly what I want, because I want this to kind of like prepare a movement, kind of spool up to the opposite direction and then do really fast rotation to the side. So I will click away, select only this handle and create this dip here. And that you will see create that movement to the other side and then finish the rotation. And now to make this a little bit steeper, let's go right here and we can right click here and insert single keyframe. And we can click away and modify this handle right here to make this animation really steep at this point. So it will kind of prepare the movement and then do this really fast spin according to the curve. Okay, I really like this. So let's now take care of the weapons there, or the tools. So let's select the hammer and let's find the finish frame, something like this, like 30 or let's say maybe 40. And we're just right click here and insert keyframes on the scale and do the same thing for the sword here. So right click and insert keyframes, and now select the hammer again. Let's go back to something like 20, and let's just click and drag here over all three values and press 0 and enter, and right click and insert keyframes. So now if I press A and hit period here we have the scale curves for the X, Y, and Z, and basically it will just pop up here like this. Now let's do the same for the sword. We were on the frame 20 there, so let's do the same thing there. Let's go to frame 20 and let's click and drag, 0, right click and insert keyframes. So now this will be too uniform, so I want to shift that animation so they appear not at once. So let's say I want the hammer to appear first, so let's just select the hammer and we'll select all these keyframes here and press G, then X, and move them to the side here to, let's say, 30. And now we have the hammer appearing and then the sword, but I think this is too much and it's easier to do in the timeline, so press Ctrl Tab here. And if we select both of those, you will see the offset there. So these are the keyframes for the hammer, so press G, then X, and move them like this. So this offset should be enough. Okay, but I want the animation to be more funky, so let's select the hammer again, Ctrl Tab here, and I want to drag the selection here to select all of these keyframes for X and Y and Z, press T and choose bounce, and they'll create something like this, really fast animation with the bounce effect, and probably we'll need to shift this a little bit further away. But let's do the same for the sword first. So let's just drag selection here, press T and choose bounce. And now we can select both, press A, Ctrl Tab and press G, then X, and move them away a little bit. So let's, maybe sooner. So you'll have to play around, play the animation a few times and see what works best for you, what speed of the animation. But I think this is quite alright, and I really like the springiness of the animation. It feels really snappy, and I think something like 70 should be the end frame, so we don't have to render much. So that's the animation, and let's finish basically with our lighting and materials. Now the main part of the tutorial is the modeling and the animation and setting up the camera and everything. But I want to show you how I would finish this for the final render. But I will go a little bit faster over this. So most notably, I will use few procedural materials. I will use some textures from Polygon. When it comes to that procedural textures, I already have tutorial for that type of procedural texturing. So go look it up in my tutorials playlist if you're interested to see how you create grunge maps or edge masks and something like that. And when it comes to Polygon, I have their add-on. So let me switch this back to render preview, hold Z, render. And here I want to switch this to asset browser. So the Polygon add-on allows me to have all the HDRI from their website available here as assets in the asset library. It's just super convenient, but it's not mandatory. So if you like to achieve the same result but don't want to get the add-on, you can just go ahead and go to polygon.com and download these assets yourselves and then import them into Blender and load them up in the shader editor. Again, there are a lot of tutorials in my playlist how to add textures, how to use textures from Polygon. So I want to speed this up a little bit here. So let's go for textures, and I want to look for something wooden here, all like this. And I really like this dark wood, so I will just drag it here on the shield. And now let's select the shield, and I will expand the window here on the side and switch this to UV editor. And now tap into the edit mode, and I want to do this fairly quick, so I'll just press U and Smart UV Project. And now you can see it unwrapped them nicely in a line, but this doesn't match the wood texture, so I'll press R and 90 here in the UV editor to match this on the wooden texture there. and this looks nice already. So I'll select the handle and apply the same material there as well. And same, I will tab into the edit mode and press U and smart UV project like this. And again, I will rotate this 90 degrees to match the texture there. So that's for the wooden texture. Now let's add some leather texture for the handle here. And we have something like fabric and leather red. By the way, when you're looking for these textures, the names are same on their website. So you can just download those maps and import them in shader editor. So I'll just drag the leather texture here on the handle. And let's just select the handle. Now we'll tab into the edit mode and let's just unwrap this in a very simple way. So I'll enable X-ray view, alt click one of the loops here behind, press U, mark seam, A, unwrap, and then probably make this smaller so it's more present there. Something like this. Let's look from the front. And now let's create that metal material. So I will select the shield here, create a new one. Let's call this metal. And I will increase the metallic value there all the way to 1. And maybe reduce the brightness there. And a little bit of roughness. Now I'll apply the same material to all of these. And finally here, but I will duplicate this before there's any texture there. And I want to reduce the roughness so it's nice and smooth. Now we'll play around with the lighting some more. But before we do, let's just switch to the shader editor there. And for the shading, I use Fluent Materializer, which allows me to use some of these shortcuts for edge mask. And they have some of these grunge masks and imperfections that are easily, placed within your node tree and easily edited. They're almost all procedural. But again, if you don't want to invest in the add-on, it's pretty affordable. By the way, no affiliation here. You can just go ahead and search for some roughness grunge maps on Google and, find maybe some free textures and use those and try to accommodate them. But first, let's make sure we are on the correct material here on the hammer. And I will just click here and import this, and you will see it's a nice node group here, and I can just plug the roughness right in and we'll get something like this. Now I will reduce the scale to something like 0.05, maybe even less, maybe 0.01. And you can see it's still nice because it's completely procedural. And I will just go ahead and reduce this roughness to 0.25 maybe. So it's really subtle. And then maybe 0.15 here, like this. And I want to keep this one really glossy without the grunge map. Now there are not a lot of reflections visible here, and we can either try to add more artificial lights, or we can use HDRIs, which is really convenient that they're here in the Polyhaven add-on. Again, no affiliation here. I just got these add-ons for myself and I use them regularly. And I think there's really nice one with, the Colosseum one. So you can find it. And I will just drag it into the scene here. And you will see how that changes. So now we can press N here to collapse this and switch from object to world. And we'll get this HDRI node group. And we can reduce the strength. So I think something like -2 should be fine. I really only want subtle reflections here. I don't want to overblow the scene with that HDRI. So something like this should work just nicely, and you will see the metal material now has completely different quality, has some additional reflections and stuff like that. So I really like this so far. Now let me select the background and increase the roughness there. Okay, and now we can go to render settings. Let's collapse this a little bit. And we can find color management, switch look to something like medium high contrast, and play with the exposure. And create something like this. Now, if you want, you can select these lights and play with their colors a little bit. Now give this a little bit of warmth, and then on the other side, maybe make this more pronounced in the background, and maybe even higher contrast settings. and we get this nice game theme icon animation. And now you can just go to output settings, switch this to FFmpeg, switch encoding, for example, to MP4, and then just use the folder icon here to set your folder, and then hit render animation, and you will get your result. So yeah, this is it. This is the game icon animation. I really hope you enjoyed this one. And again, if you did, please leave that like. And if you're new around here, hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.